How's your hair? Hair are you?
Shit. So freshly gone.
Yeah, I'm glad we had the first talk.
You can use
Is this good volume? Is this all right? Speak it up. No, I mean on the speaker. No, prefer not to.
Alright.
What's that? Yeah. So
The text can get kind of small at times, so if you're hard to sight. I want to move a little closer.
are you speaking? Are you talking right now? Just kidding. Yeah. So Adam said that some of the text might be pretty small. There's like snippets of PowerShell and stuff. So if you want to sit close, that's cool. If not, I usually sit in the back too. So. Oh shit. Is it recording? Good. All right. Well, I'm glad everybody could make it after that crazy after party yesterday. Dual Core does play some good music, but I'm Nate Guagenti, aka Neutron, and this is Adam.
Yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah. We'd give a bio if we had an interesting life, but it's all right. So yeah, our talk is about Windows event logs. So background of why we did this was basically Adam had been taking some forensics classes. I just finished up doing some like red team after incident, and basically these red teams usually have so much noise. It's basically like a forest falling instead of a tree falling in a forest. It's usually pretty loud. So couple of reasons: it's free, it's simple to implement with group policy. I mean, you can go 0 to hero. Your endpoints will be compromised. Network forensics becomes pretty difficult, especially with, a lot of the legitimate domains or domain fronting. APT only usually does magic sometimes. So more than likely you will catch them. This is what the vendors will tell you. And this is not a sysmon like replacement, it's a supplement. Like if you can implement sysmon, do it, but some of the places we work, you have to have an approved products list, and it's usually worse than the process is worse than applying for a home loan if anybody's ever done that, but maybe not since this is a college. So first thing, if you want anything done in security, you need to become not necessarily friends, but you need to get to know your system admins, your help desk, those folks, because they're going to be the ones who can push all this stuff for you. They're going to be ones. Specific Windows event logs you're only going to want on certain devices. More than likely, they're going to be the first line of defense. I had somebody that worked at a bank told me that the tier 3 or the higher up people had like on a whiteboard the number of days since tier 1 had talked to them, and I could just only think like, what is tier 1 not telling them, right? So they're also going to quickly help you deconflict activity. Like one of the easiest things for us is to call up the system admin, and be like, hey, was this you? And that will literally save us like, 10 hours of investigation, right? Like, yeah, that was me running that random process or doing something I shouldn't have been. So how do you so you tell these system admins, you tell these Windows admins, these folks like, I want this thing done. And the first thing, they're always going to say, having been a systems admin person, a Windows admin person, is like, well, what's in it for me? Is it going to break something? That's always the first thing, right? So you have many use cases from host-based auditing. This is big in government environments. Like, you could probably get rid of some of your ACAS and Nessus scanning with Windows event logs. Like, it's going to tell you when somebody's, you'll try not to give away too much of the talk, but the host-based auditing you can do is fantastic. Maybe somebody deleted a network share, it's why they can't access it. Hey guys, like, I'm able to tell some of the admins, like, hey, this computer is going to die. Like, it's throwing errors left and right. And then, yeah, one of my funny ones is, well, like when people constantly turn off computers. So, but yeah, come up with some of your own ideas. Like, we haven't scratched the surface, and I'll probably say that another 3 times. Just a disclaimer, not speaking on behalf of my company, but just a disclaimer in case you push this and you break everything, like, test it, until you can't test it anymore. Usually create a VM that's connected to your domain, push a GPO specific to that computer after you've already gone through like your own little lab first, right? And become a user, test all different things, right? Like and then repeat and repeat again until you can't anymore, and then you're gonna keep having to anyways. So Windows Event Forwarding, like I said, can be pushed through, it's built in, can be pushed through GPO, sent from all your hosts, your servers, yeah, any Windows device, push it to your SIM. We used Elasticsearch because with NXLog, because basically, and it's in the talk later, but like we have 2,000 fields with Windows event logs, and Elasticsearch has the ability to dynamically create fields. So with one of the places we have to use ArcSight, like I had to spend 2 days writing parser for PowerShell just to jam it into ArcSight specific fields. And even in the security fields, which they do have a parser for, it doesn't even grab half the fields. So there's probably 100 different channels you could subscribe to, so you can imagine, and there's many events in those channels. So multiplying those things, having to deploy in something like ArcSight, I'd be spending the next year trying to write those parsers. So I'm gonna let Adam talk now. Does that mic work? All right.
Testing? Yep, there we go. All right, so Nate and I have the opportunity. We have a few different environments that we're monitoring, and some of the stuff that we set up ourselves. So one of the networks is mostly power users, like a management network. One is end users, and then we have some labs and stuff that we've set up specifically. One of them is a Cuckoo lab that we just execute samples on all day and look at the event logs. And if there's something new and interesting, we go take a deeper look at it. But there'll be more about that.
Well, and just to say something, like one of the management networks also has like a lot of developers, so that's pretty interesting to monitor, because some of the attacks coming out using like built-in binaries like MS build can become difficult to detect in people who are developing .NET and C#. So, sorry.
Yeah. So when you talk about like events per second, a lot of anyone who's had to do SIM architecture or anything like that, events per second is always a concern. So just to give you a rough idea, when you set up WEF, you're looking at upwards of 3 events per second. It could be a lot more though, depending on the policy that you set up, especially in DoD environments. Like the dissystig says enable object access auditing, and then it says increase your max log size to 5 megabytes larger. And then so I don't know if anyone's had to do forensics where you're receiving boxes from different DoD agencies, but a lot of times one of the issues is that they enable all this auditing, and then you only have 12 hours of security logs going back. So it's like a huge thing. Like they're basically masking any sort of activity that ever happened. I mean, you can go in with shadow volume copies and maybe go back another week or 2, but then at the same time, you're only seeing an 8-hour window. It's a big problem. So make sure you're forwarding your event logs, or you're going to be sad. You're definitely going to be sad.
Hey, you want to mention a few of the things that weren't in the STIG?
No.
No? All right.
All right. So my personal recommendation is the more you enable, just keep increasing that size. As part of your testing is like look at how long it takes for these security events to fill up, because you're going to be sitting sad if your forwarding fails. You go to the host and you only have 8 hours of event logs. You're not going to be able to do any sort of research. So here's a breakdown. This is from Kibana and Elastic, where you can see security is the big beast. So this is logarithmic. As it goes up, it starts going by tens. So 800,000 events per every 2 hours for like a network. I think there was like 200 posts reporting in this one.
There's like 600.
Yeah, 600 of hosts reporting in this specific example. So this is over a business day. As you can see, there's like not really a jump in events during normal business hours, maybe a little bit for PowerShell. But other than that, like, I don't know. If you're looking at like machine learning and stuff, I don't think there's anything you're going to get out of, oh, there was 5 more events during this 5-second period on Tuesday. So like I said, we have a Cuckoo malware lab too that we had set up to start identifying interesting event IDs. So what we do is we pull samples from MalWR, VirusShare, these sorts of things, about 500 a day, run them through a Cuckoo lab that we have with some special sauce in there. So in Elastic, it actually has a URI in there that you can click, and then it'll take you to the Cuckoo information. So if there's an interesting event and there's a new sample, something interesting we want to take a look at, based off the event ID, we can go in and then take an actual look at that sample to see what it's doing. So just from experience, a lot of times we provide this sort of visibility to Windows events to users and analysts who haven't had this sort of wide host monitoring before. Because WEF is free, so you can tell them, and it's already part of Windows, so you go in there and you're like, hey, just click these few audit policies, and all of a sudden you have 10 times more awareness of what's going on with your endpoints than you had before, and then they don't know what to do with it. So just keep in mind that this is more of like a hunting sort of thing. There's not a lot of stuff that you can learn on. We're going to get into the stuff you can learn on, but a lot of it is aggregations, making comparisons to what happened today versus yesterday.
30 days.
Yeah, doing 30-day pools for process name and looking at all the unique samples. So, and in the environments that we run, like doing something like that, I'll look at, for instance, all of our domain admins follow a specific naming convention. So I'll look for every user that follows that naming convention and look at every process they ran for the last 2 days or so. And then there's something interesting in there. You just take a look at it. So it's not something that a machine is necessarily going to alert on. But as I said before, there is some stuff that you can alert on. We'll get into that later. So one of the things, like, you're going to learn pretty quickly what your baseline looks like, what normal is, so it's you learn a lot about Windows. The more insight you have on your endpoints, you're going to learn a lot more about how Windows really works on a day-to-day basis. So if you find something interesting, an anomaly in some of these events, what's the next step? Definitely, you want to contextualize that event. A lot of the times, Nate and I receive reports from a specific group of people that's just like, hey, this event happened. And then we're like, okay, well, did you go and see what else happened on that box that day, or what else that user did that day, or anything like that? And they're like, no, but this looks weird. So, yeah, definitely want to go back, start putting context behind the event. So, and another thing, just a reminder, like Windows logs can be fragile. So, and so can every other artifact when you're doing a forensic investigation. So it's really nice to have sort of these client monitoring solutions that are going together. So if you already have something like Carbon Black or something like that on your endpoints, it's definitely probably worth looking at enabling WEF or something like it, because if you have the more tools you have agreeing with one another, the stronger your gut feeling is going to be about what happened on your host if there's an incident. So you definitely want to have as much stuff as agreeing as possible. So anyways, logs can be fragile though, so there can be permissions changes on the files. People can change the timestamps. The disk on the host can become full, and it will start spitting out 521 errors and things like this. So yeah, that's actually kind of interesting. So if Windows cannot log something, it logs something.
Yep.
All right, so this is basically like Fisher-Price level, event ID 4688. So this stuff is right out of the Cuckoo lab that we run. Yeah, this is all bad. So if you haven't ever seen bad before, if you see something like this on a host, it's not good. It's not good. You might want to get a friend who knows a little bit more about what to do. So if you're not familiar with some of this, like PowerShell with execution policy bypass, that's like basically PowerShell shouldn't be able to run stuff on your host. But by default, you have to pass an execution policy bypass to do it. Every PowerShell module that's offensive pretty much has this statement in there, so you can flag on it. A lot of legitimate stuff does too, but it's easy to filter out once you see your baseline. Another thing that you'll see, and again, this is all from the, I think it's a little clear on the next page. Yeah. So this is all again from Cuckoo. These are all droppers. A lot of them are ransomware droppers. They all love to use W script, C script. It's easy, simple, stupid. You know, what's kind of interesting is that the Visual Basic and languages like it that Windows understands a default install. I mean, some of the original pieces of malware that really started floating around it's been written in the same stuff, same type of language, Visual Basic for a real long time. So it's interesting to see that ransomware and stuff for these droppers going back to these scripts. All right, so we said a little bit about talking about APT. So this is a sample that we had that was a Deep Panda confirmed sample where they basically and this is all public knowledge, it's out there and available, but they basically masked our like VPN, and it's a dropper, right? So when you have droppers, you're always going to have some sort of event, and especially if it's a phishing email, means that there's going to be a Windows event on the box, and you're going to have 468 events. So up here, this is a 4688. You know, process names that don't end in exe. That might be something you could flag on, for instance. And then, as you can see down here, well, maybe not, because maybe the projector's blocking you a little bit, but they added their persistence was a media center.exe as a scheduled task. Yeah, right, sorry, right here. It's a registry under current version run, added media center. So there's definitely things that you can flag on, even with these APT advanced threats. Like, a lot of people think Windows is useless, but especially with these droppers, there's always some sort of artifact.
I mean, that sample stood out. Like, you know, you're doing stack counting, reversing, or, you know, sort by like least occurrence, and, you know, even if I probably pulled 120 days, these things would stand out. Running like 4 or 5 system32 commands, like he said, exes that don't end in exe, right? So, I mean, stuff like this is pretty Fisher-Price. It's just these APTs just assume nobody has this monitoring.
So this is also from the lab, the Cuckoo lab. So there's a sample that shut off event logging. So you can monitor for 1100. or system 104. The problem being that when the computer shuts down, can also cause this event. So just keep that in mind if you're looking for it. Yeah, so adding local admin. Here's a sample from the lab that added the account, guest account. And so basically the type of pool that you would do is look for all 4722 events and then look at the account name that was added. And then if you see one that doesn't rhyme, if you see a celebrity name in there, user Whoopi Goldberg, for instance, maybe that'd be, true story. We have a user on one of our networks. It's like Michael Phelps was his name, and I saw it, and I was like, oh God, that's the end of the world. But that was because I wasn't expecting it to be a real user, but it was, so not a big deal. So a lot of hotness, a little maybe back in 2015 and this year, to people or 2016, people talking about WMI after a Black Hat conference in 2015 kind of became a big deal. Some APT groups started using it. So Windows, it logs WMI, which is Windows management, and basically it's like SQL S statements that you are using to query your computer or to add certain functionalities to it, take away from those functionalities, etc. But the big one, so for malware, especially droppers, if you're looking at anti-analysis, a lot of them will use this to see what antivirus product is running on the computer, or which they'll pull from the BIOS and see if you have VMware anywhere in the BIOS dump that it pulls. So a lot of times they screw this up. Luckily, so WMI activity, it'll show up in there. This is some stuff from the lab that the droppers messed up their statement and it ended up getting caught. So if you want a little bit more insight, this is new. People are just getting into look at event tracing. So Windows has an event tracing framework that is extremely verbose. And Matt Swan from Microsoft, he wrote a wrapper for it. If you're interested in doing some super cool, deep analysis of what's going on in your host, take a look at that. I don't get into it in this talk, but take a look at it for yourself and see if you might be able to implement it in your environment. But so event tracing, some stuff though is available, and for instance, in Internet Explorer, you can enable trace log, and it will show you all the session headers for people using Internet Explorer. So you can pull, if you're a red team, you can pull username and passwords out of that without having to do any sort of fancy hooking of Internet Explorer. You can live off the land. Microsoft has this built in. So enjoy. Cyberpoint gets into it. Take a look at their blog. If you're a red teamer, you might find it interesting. The other thing is that with event tracing for USB devices. Basically, the guys at Cyberpoint wrote a tool that will decipher the trace log for the USB channels and turn it into a keylogger. So every keystroke that a user does is logged. Potentially, you have to enable it, but it's built in by default a keylogger into Windows using event tracing for Windows. But so the Fisher-Price. The easiest way, the easiest one to enable and get the most out of is Windows has an event log called WMI Activity Trace, and it logs everything WMI. So in this instance, someone got the select all from Win32 BIOS to look for VMware command correct, and this wouldn't have been caught by the WMI operational log. But as you can see, it got caught in its event ID 11. And then these WMI activity event IDs are all over the place. But so this is remote WMI event ID 1. And it logs the user who did it and the command they ran. So in this instance, I ran this one myself. I didn't have a sample to do this. So I just pulled all the information about the operating system on the host. And but it all gets logged, and you can query it if you have something like Elastic helping you out. So in the Black Hat talk, they talk about adding classes for persistence. So that also gets logged. As you can see, there's some information in there that might give it away. Put class. And I gave it a pretty obvious name, but yeah, because I called it evil class as an example. But if you go in and look, this doesn't really happen all that often. Maybe if someone's installing software, it might happen, but you can definitely easily create an aggregation for this and just take a look. The last 30 days, what new classes were added via WMI? Oh, this one's called Adobe Reader WMI class. Adobe Reader is part of our image, so probably shouldn't be installing a new class. Should already be installed, so it's a little suspicious. Stuff like that. They also had a persistence mechanism actually using Windows event logs by pushing a consumer. So basically, the consumer says the way that it works in Windows is if you see this event log, do this. This process or this file handles that. So the persistence mechanism was creating one of these consumers and giving it a malicious file to do it. So that'll execute when a specific event happens. So I did, once again, I have a sample that did this, so I ran it myself, called it evil consumer to make it blatantly obvious to everyone here. But it gets logged. And then, so another thing you can do is with WEF and through GPO, if you want to run some sort of mass query on your network and get those results back without having to write that client-server infrastructure, you can just hijack Windows Event Forwarding. So, like for instance, if you want to run get process netstat or get WMI object on every one of your hosts every 30 seconds and forward it to your SIM with Windows Event Forwarding and a couple PowerShell classes or commandlets, sorry, you can do that. So just create a new event log and then write to it with the message of that event log being the output of your script or what you found interesting, and it'll all get forwarded to your SIM if you have WEF set up and you subscribe to those channels.
All right, so just to speak on like one thing Adam said, that we've just to go further into like what you can do with Windows Event Log, especially the tracing. With the HTTPS, we've discussed like potentially using that as an equivalent or replacement for like an SSL decryptor. Obviously, granted the risk of like storing those things in logs, but if you override them or rotate them fast enough, it's an accepted risk. Obviously, if you're not decrypting as HTTPS in the first place, you're taking an accepted risk. So, I'd rather have one user read somebody else's cookies than, miss everything, right? So, 70-80% of your traffic. Also, with the HTTPS is like, again, environments where like, if anybody's ever tried to do 802.1x or SSL decryption, you probably know that getting somebody to push a root CA or a CA that can basically be authoritative to every site is pretty difficult. So this is just PowerShell version 5, again from the lab. basically copying executable into memory. And just to speak on like why we ran the lab basically because, we only had like 1,000 hosts or less, and a lot of these people are like competent. They're competent technical people. So, they're not. A lot of them run ad blockers and those sort of things. Like they're not installing hardly any programs, and if they do, most of them know how to run in a VM. So we really did push on the Cuckoo sandbox to supplement the fact that like, okay, what we're doing actually works. So I'm going to get in. The last couple slides are going to be the why I say, even if you have Carbon Black or Sysmon or those other things, why you should use WEF. Because, there's certain things that WEF will log that none of those will. Not that they don't work or anything. That's just not their sauce. But, this is sort of stuff that like, lateral movement in Insider, I consider an insider somebody who's an outsider that's doing lateral movement. They have just passed the step of sending your HR department, resume.pdf.exe. So they're now have legitimate credentials. You have to treat them the same. Maybe somebody with some science degree or something will disagree with me, but that's the way I treat it, and it's worked out for us. Also, just to note, like, so people talk about like Canary or Honeypot, like credentials and files, which I think are great. You should do. We haven't got into it too much again because we're assuming that somebody already has legitimate credentials. And so what we'll do is basically run lots of queries on, keywords of somebody who is essentially performing, like they've made it in and they're performing reconnaissance because you have all your Visio diagrams, your IP subnet list, basically that everybody can access on one shared drive, which isn't necessarily bad, right? Like it's better to your guys to know what's on your network than not, but it's also easy to take advantage of and live off the land, but at the same time it's very easy to monitor that this person opened up 60 Visio diagrams. And again, following an account scheme, he's a security guy or he's a system admin. Why is he reading every network diagram on like BGP and MPLS? Like that, he probably doesn't know what it is. So this one from a blog, Harmjoy. So basically what this gives you is the ability to control all users. And again, this is just the event ID. If I ran the query up at the top, it would only be the malicious thing. These slides I'm going to show you are 30-day queries with basically no filtering, just to show you how easy it is. A lot of people talk about false positives and this and that, and I agree with that with signatures and stuff. But if it takes you, like for example, when Java was like the big thing for exploit kits, like I was like, writing these signatures is worthless. Like, so I spent a week basically whitelisting legitimate Java usage. So the fact that you can get rid of like signatures, like, don't make all your people do this, but if they don't mind, somebody like me who thinks, logs are sexy, like, let them do it, like who cares? So this is one, it was like 171,000 events before I did the filtering, right? There's one simple filtering up at the top in the red. Microsoft recommends it. It's not running anything malicious. But again, if I were to run that query at the top, these should all be oh crap alerts. Like this is what Harmjoy and Pyrotech have been talking about with like Kerberos and other stuff. And basically, allowing efficient hash cracking, like very efficient, like RC4 sort of stuff, or just storing the passwords in clear text, period, right? Like Sysmon and those sort of things probably not going to catch this. Like, and again, those things are great. Like, but these are, somebody's already made it into your network and they're doing what these folks call like a sneaky backdoor. This is another one, service principal name, basically giving you the right to control another user account. So the other one was every user account. This one is like a specific user account. So obviously didn't see this on my network, ran the attack myself with Wolf and Sheep up in the top, on the top right. Again, 30 days, and I've done no filtering, just the event ID. If I were to do the filtering, basically would filter down the user on the bottom left and service principal name. And then again, I have basically less than 200 events. It would take me 3 seconds to find bad, right? So again, for the second time, we have not scratched the surface. Like me and Adam we started this in our spare time. Thankfully, we've been able to work together for the last 6 months, but we started this before we worked together. We've been doing this in our spare time, also doing reverse engineering, cybersecurity engineering for 10 gig plus. So, we all talk about it later, but a few other things. So you have PowerShell 5 enabled module logging. Great, this would bypass. Well, pretty simple. Windows PowerShell, the original one, you can either, a lot of times, like people running PowerUp and PowerView and those sort of things, even with version 2, it'll throw some errors more than likely. Or you could just do a query, PowerShell engine version 2. Somebody's creating backup images, all sorts of stuff for exfil, services installed, everybody loves this for persistence. Scheduled task creation, this really frustrated me when I read one of the oil companies would hit with all this wiper and they created a scheduled task. And again, you might get maybe a few million in a day, but again, it's usually something like Microsoft Office activation, a day of filtering, and you should easily be able to catch something like this. And I'm not victim blaming them. This security is hard. It's very hard. Again, you have people logging in. So these weak passwords, the one was enabling it. Well, what if it's already enabled? How do you detect that? Should be 4768, or I think maybe 46242. People using MD5 and RC4 and all the fun stuff. Some other backdoors, user script path, adding that. So what I would probably do is create something in the sysvol that all users can read or something. Add that to their script path and Active Directory. Certificate issued for unauthorized device for 802.1x. Someone cleared firewall policies. The list literally goes on forever. Since we don't have a lot of hosts that finding good stuff and had to supplement with, not necessarily unrealistic thing, but something that doesn't make your adrenaline rush. Is if we have time and not everybody in this room takes us up on this offer in the whole world, but we don't mind assisting, helping, just as long as maybe you let us run a few queries just to scratch that itch. Last part, monitor your or not the last part, but huge thing, monitor your monitoring. I can't stress this enough. Whether it's taking temperature of your server room and having a MiFi connected to send it out. Whether it's doing config diffs of switches and sending added and removed. You can't protect what you don't know. Somebody at 2 a.m. is probably going to do something stupid. Not necessarily stupid, but just the fact that they got a call from somebody, they got woke up, they're stressed out, they're not thinking clearly. You have to monitor your monitoring. So, figure out what the GPO IDs are for all the different things from, process auditing with command line, those sort of things. Anytime there's a modification, you should know, right? We create a PowerShell script to basically say all the hosts that have checked in the last, 8 hours, 4 hours, 24 hours, whatever you want, and then compare that to the unique host that Elasticsearch has seen. Okay, we have 100 hosts not checking in. Well, I thought we got pushed to group policy through anything with authenticated users, which should be any computer. Well, who knows? Go figure it out, right? This is another one, create alerts for how many times I've seen people say, well, oh, we're receiving no events. That is kindergarten monitoring. You should know if you're not receiving any events. And going above and comparing X number, to previous days, whatever. At the minimum, if stuff's not checking in, you should know. So this next one, the event forwarding log, surprisingly enough, you wouldn't think that creating a subscription to WEF errors would be smart, because well, if you have WEF errors, then how are you going to forward WEF Windows events? Well, normally this one works, and we created a subscription specific just for this, so we can monitor the other subscriptions. And then for the web server itself, it has an event collector channel. We still got another 15, 20 minutes, so I guess I'll go over all these if you guys don't mind. But first one, device network and inventory. This is another thing I can't stress on more than getting to know your system admins and your Windows admins and help desk, like being a part of the baseline process, being a part of the hiring process, like figuring an environment out. Like I got so sick of working at like a tier 3, some people will call it tier 1, but a point where like you don't get to be down in the roots. Like I've gone and taken device inventory myself because I find a compromised host, my incident response is worthless if I cannot find that host. Like I might as well go home. So this is huge. You can use Windows event logs to help, and you should help, period, right? Like you're in security, you're not above anything. You're all on the same team, protecting the same company, whatever. Like Adam said, increase the log size. You know, we do 500 megs or more. You know, if you're running out of hard disk space, then yeah, you caught that. If you're running out of hard disk space, then, you know, I feel sorry for you since it's 2017. But yeah, this is another one. Again, working with help desk, getting access to a ticketing system. So you know, I was doing an actual investigation where some really weird programs ran, some services installed, and within a matter of like 2 minutes, I was able to deconflict it by accessing the help desk and seeing that one of the system admins was troubleshooting a hard drive. Like that is invaluable of time. That saves me hours, right? Because not only would I have had to investigate that computer, I would have to investigate every other computer that user logged in, and it just becomes a nightmare. Again, create unique subscriptions. We do one specifically for a security channel, and we send this, basically, Microsoft has like high bandwidth sending, or like send it as fast as possible. Other things you might not want to, you know, some people I guess have like 2 meg links in, you know, some remote country and they're doing the monitoring in the United States or something, and so they can't. But if you can send things as fast as possible, this is just a recommendation for those, especially your network admins. Oh, you're taking all our bandwidth. So, and even with the security channel, you can subscribe to specific event IDs. So, like, you know, 1102 event log cleared. Like, unless somebody's running CC cleaner, which probably shouldn't be anyways, but in admin networks they are. They basically can do whatever they want. You know, you should know right away if somebody's clearing event logs. Custom software, create subscriptions for that. So like people who have Sysmon installed, create a subscription just for that. I ran into, every once in a while, there's no reason why you can't figure it out, but where if one of the channels errors, then the rest of those subscriptions err. So if you're subscribing to every channel and that one error and that computer doesn't have it, those other channels might error and you might not get the stuff. So for custom software, create a subscription just for that. Just a side note, we've only been doing this in Windows 7 environment. Windows 10 is essentially the same. Well, actually, yeah, they didn't add a whole lot of new events. They just added like 1 or 2 extra pieces of data in the events, but I don't know how they do the process, command line auditing, given, you know, don't have all the time in the world, but they start logging like when the system boots. Windows 7 does not, so you actually never see system.exe install or start, which would be nice because then you could basically alert, like, if not PID 4, then we got a problem because system.exe is always PID 4. If you want to get real crazy, real paranoid, I am, but I don't have the time to be with this. Is you can encrypt the logs with PGP. You know, bandwidth, you can limit the resources based on the number of events or the CPU. And Adam kind of touched on this, like machine learning, you know, for Windows event logs, people who are a lot smarter than me and running in a lot larger environments kind of agree. Because how do you tell the difference between somebody testing new software and somebody installing like a malicious piece of software that's never been seen? But also, you go and set it up in an environment that's already been deployed. Like, how do you know that your machine learning is not baselining malware that's been running for so long that it is now baselined as legitimate? So, just a one-off. You know, work with a lot of network admins. I was one, but jump boxes are just a lazy solution to create one any instead of like a bunch of any rules. And it's just an easy way to steal other people's smart card readers that are logged in. You know, not only everybody's probably storing passwords in their desktop, so once you get system and can read their stuff, but at that point, like, going even beyond that, which you probably don't need to, but reading memory of like everybody logging into all the routers and firewalls with secure CRT and PuTTY and those things, like it's ridiculous. Don't enable jump boxes. Maybe somebody knows why they're better than not, but let me know. I'd like to know, so I stop spewing something wrong. But and the last thing, run your SIM, run your database if you can. You know, you may be wearing a tinfoil hat doing this, but for some people they have to. Is basically run it on a different AD authentication environment, and don't run your VMs on the ESXi server or the virtual environment that people can log into with the Active Directory that you're monitoring. Like, does that make sense? Like, so basically, you have to assume that, like, if you can access any VM, you can do anything to that, right? You can copy the memory, you can delete it, all sorts of things. Like, just don't do this. And again, I don't pretend to be very smart. I don't really know a whole lot. I've been doing this in my spare time for the third time. I have yet to even scratch the surface. I'm a lot like this llama. You know, we want to help. Maybe somebody in this room knows that I can tend to be an aggressive person, but only because I'm passionate. But I love to learn from other people. That's how I started. Even if you're smart and you think, you know, you don't help the people that don't know anything, you're obviously not smart, and you're obviously stupid enough to realize at one point you didn't know anything. So, since, you know, I'll probably wrap up about 5 or 6 minutes short, and I'm not going to go over all this. I'm eventually going to disseminate the slides, but these are some one-offs. Doing help desk at one point, but at the same time being the Windows admin, which is mildly depressing, is, you know, like, make the policies apply every time, every X amount of time, because you're like, oh yeah, we changed our desktop background. Well, they can still change their desktop background, but then like when the policy refreshes, there's certain settings by default. If it doesn't change, don't apply that policy. Like if the group policy itself doesn't change, it doesn't check if the desktop has changed and they installed, you know, put a picture and they're in the front lobby and, you know, now you're going to have a real problem. The bottom one is important. Very important. There could be a superseding or whatever policy that's broad that doesn't have the more specific things enabled, and that will actually override the broader things. Some resources, again, disseminate this stuff. There's no point in reading a bunch of HTTP sites. And let's see, yeah. Last thing, all these people, I push notifications from my phone. I got to the point where following like 500 or 600 blogs and following 1,000 people on Twitter, I don't follow vendor accounts. I follow the actual people who do the stuff. And at this point, just having a kid and all that stuff, you know, trying to be there with them, like don't have the time to read half the stuff that I used to. Have push notifications for all these folks. And these aren't, you know, folks in 0 days and that sort of stuff, but this is all related to Windows stuff in some sense, right? You got the people who are creating UAC bypasses and even the new like file locker, the new file locker, I forget what it is, whatever, bypasses. People you don't want tweeting about your network like Taviso and Caffeine, who basically is going to tell you anytime you're going to get hit with exploit kit like wide range, right, or some other crimeware. So, yeah, thanks for coming to talk. If you guys have any questions, let me know. If you don't feel comfortable asking questions now, again, come up and talk to me. You know, there's always something to learn, and this field's so broad, you literally cannot learn everything. And the more you learn, the more you realize you have no idea what the heck you're doing. So, yeah. Yeah, so he asked, have I ever done it manually by going into Windows Manage? Yeah, absolutely you can. So I enable it on my own computer, even though I don't know why it's running a VM and I only use it to RDP and this stuff, connect to like a VPN. But yeah, you can just go into Windows Manager. You just basically like right click on the event log that you want, properties, and overwrite, don't overwrite, change the file size, those sort of things. Yes, sir.
I was wondering for a practical solution or concept for when you're doing event forwarding for remote users or mobile users that aren't on all the time.
Yeah.
Forward,
Yep.
what do you do in those cases?
Yeah. So we have a lot of that. So he asked, what do you do in the case of like remote users, some you don't have necessarily, like a BYOB, BYOD, but not BYOB. Sorry, that's later. BYOD, bring your own device. So that's basically a risk we have accepted, and hopefully, where our resources are, like you have to take an assessment of your network. Like, does it really even matter if somebody compromises AD? Maybe it doesn't even matter. Who knows? But like maybe it's more important your intellectual property that's stored on a Linux server. Like, and the AD server is only used for like a few, like a few janitors to log into some computers at night when they don't have anything to do, or security guards or something like that. So like you could probably care less, right? Focus your efforts somewhere else that matter. So we basically accept that risk. I've thought about it a lot. It used to keep me up at night, and I used to like try to care about it. But with BYOD, just protect the assets that you can and that are most important. If BYOD and they're storing all the important data on it, which they might be, gotta find out another way, right? Like force them to VPN in and not allow basic file transfer. Try, right? Don't make it easy. Like don't leave the door open. Obviously, somebody can pick the lock or just ram the door. So, yeah, that's a good question, though. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not an Elasticsearch spokesperson, but having dove into the database a lot, yeah, ArcSight definitely has that problem. It's still great, obviously, but we love free. Elasticsearch is free. You can pay for their support if you need it. Some environments you have to have it, but yeah, I know a lot of people have had that problem. We've had that problem in ArcSight, but the thing with Elasticsearch is you can generate the fields dynamically, but which I actually haven't gotten to yet, but with other logs I have, is you can basically create your own analyzers. So like, I haven't done it for Windows logs because there's so many and I haven't needed to, but Elasticsearch indexes at write time. So the reason it's so fast is because it basically already has the answer to the question you're going to ask, which, okay, great, I don't get like 5 times compression and this and that, but let's be honest, like data storage is so cheap, and if it's free, instead of paying $150 million for Splunk, like spend $50 million if you want to. You probably only need to spend 10 on like just massive amounts of servers with massive amounts of storage, right? Like it's a no-brainer. So I don't know, did that answer your question? Yeah, sorry. Like I said, I'm not a spokesperson, but it's free. There's no reason not to use it. So, yeah. Have not ran into that. He asked hunting down something and it started from the boss's computer. Again, we're dealing in environments like even the C levels are fairly technical, so but that's why we would love come help people out, like I said, to scratch that itch. But I know people have ran into that.
I have had a CISO open a phishing link.
Yeah, we have all had it. And yeah, probably wrap up, take like 2 more questions. But hold on, just to say that, again, the suspicious stuff, like we've seen like help desk software, program, whatever server, like run system32 commands like legitimately, like IP config and who am I. So, just baseline this stuff, figure it out. That was kind of a tangent, but go ahead.
So from an IR perspective,
Yeah.
you don't have consistent
Yeah.
logging coming in. Is Elasticsearch something that we can kind of use?
Yeah, so he asked for IR coming in after the fact. People don't have some of this stuff enabled, even though Windows will definitely have a few things enabled by default.
In the logs, it's just a matter of we don't have the climate.
Yeah.
Yours sucks, right?
Yeah, Windows Event Viewer is nice if it's like your own computer, but getting a couple hundred megs. So yeah, Elasticsearch, I know there's actually a distro for Elasticsearch using the SANS class specific for forensics. Eventually, after our next talk, we're going to release like our Google Docs spreadsheet that we have basically tried to go through every Windows event log in every channel, and we're not even close to scratching the surface for the 4th time. In every channel, for use cases, a help desk, system admin, host-based auditing, user auditing, and forensics was a big one. And it's it's easy use of dynamic field creation if you don't want to spend six months writing a parser, right? I would definitely recommend it, and I'm willing to work with you. If not, I know people would do it even for like hard disk images from strings and stuff, dump it in there. I know some folks that are doing that. So Elasticsearch use cases is basically only limited to your creativity, anywhere from business and geospatial to security.
My goal is legitimately just to set something up one time where we can take any client.
Yep. Easy. Yeah, you absolutely could do that, whether you're just bringing the server with you or just storing the server somewhere, point log stash at the files you want, or you can pipe it directly into Elasticsearch if you don't want to massage the data, So, I think I'm going to take that as the last question. Give you guys a break before the next talk. So, thank you all for coming.